Howdy folks, and welcome back to the channel. I was recently asked a great question from a good viewer, Abdul Awathama, regarding Colorado PI licensing, or should I say the discontinuance of PI licensing here in Colorado. Now, Abdul has a YouTube channel and has been making some PI videos too, so I will leave a link for his channel down below. First off, let me cover some history about private investigators' professional licensing here in Colorado. Here is a huge secret about private investigator licensing most folks do not know. Come a little closer and listen up. Colorado was the very first state, folks, way back in 1877 that had private investigators licensing. Think about that for a minute and listen to another astounding fact. Way back in 1877, the very first law Colorado passed, yes, it was the very first law the state of Colorado passed, was the private investigators licensing law. Then in 1899, there was a booklet published that described Colorado's and other states' PI licensing laws. That booklet, titled 1899 Detective Licensing Laws, described Colorado PI licensing in this manner. This state has a PI licensing law requiring the applicant to file his petition with the governor of the state. That the governor shall determine the extent of the bond to be given, which shall not be less than $3,000 nor more than $20,000. That upon approval of the petition and acceptance of the bond, the license shall be issued on the payment of $100, extending for a period of 2 years, but subject to a revocation by the governor for cause. Acting without the statutory license is made a misdemeanor and punishable by a fine of not less than $300 nor more than $1,000, or imprisonment for a period of not less than 3 months nor more than 1 year in the county jail, or both by fine and imprisonment. This statute, however, provides that the licensed detective or detective agency may employ agents, servants, employees, and assistants who shall not be required to take out a license for themselves. For the acts of such agents, the principal is responsible under his bond. Let's break that down a little bit so we understand this a little bit better. First, back in 1877, any PI had to petition the governor of the state. Now, I am sure that this also means the governor had staff or some department doing this. I highly doubt that he was scrutinizing these applications himself. Now, another quick history lesson for you. Folks, back in 1877, the governor of the state of Colorado was none other than, yep, you guessed it, John Long Route himself. Governor Route was actually the territorial governor of Colorado from 1875 to 1876, and governor of the state of Colorado from 1876 to 1879, and then again from 1891 to 1893. Okay, back to the PI licensing. In 1877, it also required a bond to be set by the governor of $3,000 or up to $20,000. I assume the range was so it could be adjusted as the economy adjusted over time. And then the applicant had to pay a licensing fee of $100 for a PI license that lasted 2 years, and that license was subject to a revocation by the governor for cause. And further, it stated that acting without the statutory license was a misdemeanor, punishable by a fine of not less than $300 nor more than $1,000, or imprisonment for a period of not less than 3 months nor more than 1 year in the county jail, or both by fine and imprisonment. Did you catch that, folks? Working as a PI would get you a guaranteed fine and possibly some guaranteed time in the old pokey. A fine not less than $300 nor more than $1,000, and imprisonment not less than 3 months nor more than 1 year, or both. Obviously, Colorado's legislature back in 1877 took the necessity for private investigators very seriously, and I might add, so did the governor of Colorado at that time. Fast forward to 1977, yep, 100 years later, the Colorado PI licensing was found to be unconstitutional by the state Supreme Court based on one fact. That fact being that there was no clear legal definition of a private investigator. Shortly thereafter, the PPIC, Professional Private Investigators Association of Colorado, was formed to help guide future rulemakings and laws regarding PI licensing in Colorado. Then fast forward again to about 2012. After much hard work from the PPIC and other organizations and groups around the state, licensing was brought back to Colorado for private investigators. But that 2012 licensing was watered down considerably, and it was even voluntary in nature. Yep, you heard me correctly. It was voluntary. Now, in all disclosure, I am a past board member, past treasurer, and past chairman of the board for the PPIC. I am also still an active senior member, and I was involved with the organization in trying to get licensing for PIs back in the state of Colorado. That voluntary licensing went over, as they say, like a lead balloon. Yep, there were a lot of volunteers, to be sure. I think, if memory served me right, around 100 PIs had a voluntary license. That first year of voluntary licensing cost was $320, but that fee was based on the legislature thinking there would be 400 to 500 licenses. You see, in Colorado, the cost for professional licensing is borne by the profession itself. So the legislature must have estimated that it would cost around $120,000 to $160,000 a year to run and administrate the program. Year 2 rolls around and they said, wait, the cost is too high and the fees are too low. There are not enough license holders. We're losing money, and they raised the annual fee to $644. As year 3 came around, the state realized that the voluntary licensing program was doing so well, it was losing even more money. So they raised the fees to over $1,000 a year. This then caused the entire voluntary PI licensure program to come to a screeching halt, and the state was once again without PI licensing. But then in 2015, through the PPIC and their partners' diligent efforts, mandatory PI licensing was reinstated in Colorado. That first year licensing was at $330 a year. Still a bit hefty, but there were and are states with licensing costs over $1,000. And over the next 5 years, the costs continued to go down because of the number of licenses being applied for. It seems our estimates of 400 to 500 PIs in Colorado were a little off. There were actually well over 1,000 licenses issued in a short period of time. In fact, the cost got down to something like $33, then dropped to $16 a year. Now compare that to other licensing programs, and it is very easy to see that the cost for PI licensing was never a barrier to entry into the profession. Now that licensing had a 5-year sunset in 2020. Nothing strange about that. All licensing programs in Colorado have a sunset in the 2 to 5 year range. In fact, the voluntary licensing had a 2 or 3 year sunset, I believe, which was how it ended because there was no support for it, even from the PPIC, due to those high annual fees and no real consequences or rules to the licensing program. So we fast forward to 2019 now. The mandatory PI licensing program has been going well. The program is well funded through the PI profession itself with over 1,000 licensed PIs, and we are approaching the 2020 sunset. Now with a sunset, in most cases what happens is you have a new bill presented to the legislation which allows the old one to expire, and a new one is adopted, many times with minor changes. A new bill was introduced into the Colorado state legislation with minor language clarifications only, and was supported on both sides of the aisle by many Republicans and Democrats alike. In fact, a bill extended the PI licensing to 2025 was approved by both the House and the Senate on a bipartisan vote. Then in steps Governor Jared Polis, who, with a single swipe of his pen, undid all of it with a veto for whatever reason. Questions regarding his reasons for vetoing the PI licensing bill have gone unanswered as well. I couldn't even fathom a guess as to why Governor Polis would do this, folks. The bill passed in both House and Senate, was passed on a bipartisan vote, had support from representatives and senators in both the Republican and the Democratic parties, was self-funded, had absolutely zero barriers for entry into the profession, and he just did away with it. So, Abdul, your question, do you agree with the PI licensure discontinuation in Colorado? My simple answer is absolutely not. But there is more to the story. In the absence of PI licensing in Colorado, we still have a professional organization in which professional private investigators can become involved in, obtain necessary training and knowledge, and help ensure the PI profession remains professional. That organization is the PPIC, Professional Private Investigators Association of Colorado. I will leave a link below for their website for your viewing pleasure, folks. And if you want to know why a state PI association is important to the PI profession, then check out this video.